How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be doing a Green Bay Packers 53-man roster prediction post-OTAs and post-minicamp. I did one of these videos predicting the Packers 53-man roster before OTAs and minicamp, and now that both those sessions of practices are over, some things have obviously changed. We started to see how this team is shaping up to be through OTAs and minicamp, and yeah, those practices weren't padded, so there's not a crazy amount to take out of those practices, but there definitely are some changes I've made to my 53-man roster prediction after those practices. And last week, I also released a video on what we learned from OTAs and minicamp, so if you haven't watched that already, I'd really suggest go watching that video and clicking the link right above. And also, if you're a new viewer here, I'd really appreciate it if you went down and clicked the subscribe button. We just hit 39,000 subscribers on this channel. It's still just absurd to even say that. I can't thank you guys enough for taking the time out of your day to watch my content. Leave a like on the video, leave a comment. You guys are truly the best. You're allowing me to do what I love, so thank you. I post tons of Packers content right here on this channel, and as we enter this little bit of a dead zone going from the back end of minicamp to training camp, I think it's like a 40-day in between, there's not going to be a lot of Packers news coming out, but there'll still be Packers content, ton of Packers content right here on this channel. So if that does interest you, like I said, go down and click the subscribe button. All right, so without further ado, let's get into my post-OTA / minicamp Green Bay Packers 53-man roster prediction. First, I want to go over a key here, and the key basically is if a player is written in blue, that means they are a rookie from this year. If they're written in orange, they are an undrafted free agent from this year. So not from any year, just from this year, because the Packers tend to usually keep one undrafted free agent on their 53-man roster, and I don't think that changes this year. And then the last one, red, equals a street free agent, meaning they signed them as a free agent this offseason. And then also you'll see some players on the positions that are crossed out. Those are going to be the players I had on my 53-man roster in my last rendition, but aren't on this one. All right, so first we start with quarterback, and nothing has changed from my last prediction. I still have the Green Bay Packers keeping two quarterbacks on their roster, and I think those two are pretty obvious. It's Jordan Love and Sean Clifford. I'm sure there's some people that would say Danny Etling might be the second quarterback, but to me it's pretty obviously Sean Clifford. They drafted this guy in the 5th round. He has leadership, he has experience, he's looked pretty good throughout OTAs and minicamp. There's been a few sessions where he's made some really nice throws, and I think he'll be a really solid backup quarterback. Now, to be honest, I wasn't too fond of the pick in the 5th round. I feel like Clifford could have been a 6th or 7th round or even undrafted free agent type of guy, but if the Packers wanted their backup quarterback and that was their guy and they truly believe in him, I'm totally okay with it, and I think he really could be a solid backup, and say if Jordan Love had to go down for a game, he might be able to come in and potentially do pretty well. So quarterback is the same as last, and it's pretty obvious for me. Two quarterbacks. I don't think they keep all three. I highly doubt that. I think it's going to be Jordan Love and Sean Clifford. Moving on to the running back, this is where we see our first change. I obviously have Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. That is no surprise. The question after that is, who is the third running back going to be? My pre-OTA and pre-minicamp edition, I had Lou Nichols as the third running back. As you can see here, he is crossed out, and I've replaced him with my man, Tyler Goodson. I always wanted Tyler Goodson to be the third running back, but the Packers had spent a 7th round draft pick on Nichols, and I was like, okay, he'll probably make the roster. At that moment, I thought that he'll probably make the roster. They drafted him, but of course, there's so much of the offseason to go over, and obviously now we are seeing that. Through OTAs and minicamp, in my opinion, Tyler Goodson is that third running back. He's been the most impressive third guy at running back in terms of running the ball, catching the ball. He can pretty much do it all. He's technically a wide receiver coming out of the backfield. I really liked him last year as an undrafted free agent out of Iowa, and I still like him this year as the third running back over Lou Nichols, over Patrick Taylor. I know Patrick Taylor has the experience, and I know Lou Nichols has a lot of scrimmage yards out of Central Michigan in college, but I just feel like Tyler Goodson offers more upside and more potential than both of those guys. So we'll see what happens in training camp and who really runs away with that running back number 3 job. But in my opinion, right now, Tyler Goodson is leading that front, and he is my third running back, and I have the Packers only keeping 3 running backs. Now moving on to the tight end position. This one remains the same for me from my previous prediction here. Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, both are rookies. Josiah DeGuara, and Tyler Davis. Now, the Packers also have Austin Allen and Cameron McDonald, but I don't see either of those guys getting a roster spot over Tyler Davis, simply because Tyler Davis has the experience. He can play on offense if you need him to, but mainly he has experience and he's a pretty solid special teamer. And we know how the Packers prioritize keeping solid special teamers on their roster. Ever since Rich Bisaccia got here last year, the Packers have done a really good job in signing and retaining core special teams players. So that's why it's pretty obvious to me that I think Tyler Davis is going to remain on this roster. I know a lot of people don't like him. And yeah, he's not the best tight end in terms of an offensive standpoint. He can play it in a pinch, but now we have two other guys that we drafted that are going to see a lot more snaps over someone like Tyler Davis. Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft. They have also looked really nice in OTAs and minicamp, especially Luke Musgrave. He looks extremely fast, and I'm just excited for the pads to finally come on for both of these guys, just to see how fast Musgrave is with the pads on and see how tough and strong Tucker Kraft is with the pads on as well, because that dude loves contact. And Josiah DeGuara has been doing pretty well as well. I could see him getting a lot of snaps to start the year until, Musgrave and Kraft really get into that system. But the four tight ends, just like quarterback, pretty obvious for me: Musgrave, Kraft, DeGuara, and Davis. Moving on to the wide receiver position, there is a bit of a change here. I'm still going with 7 wide receivers, which I'm kind of on the fence here. I feel like the Packers could definitely keep 6, but there definitely is a chance they could keep 7. The first 5, in my opinion, are roster locks: Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, Tay Wicks, and Samori Toure. I feel like all those guys are going to make the roster. Tay Wicks has had some injuries during OTAs/minicamp, but he has practiced some. And in my opinion, there's no way this guy doesn't make the roster. Samori Toure as well. I feel like LaFleur, Jason Vrabel, the wide receiver coach, they've been boasting about Samori Toure. So I feel he definitely makes the roster. Now, where it changes for me here is I have Malik Heath making the roster instead of Grant DuBose. Now, I released a video on Grant DuBose going over his tape and, the type of wide receiver he is and how talented he is, but he hasn't practiced yet. So based off of just OTAs and minicamp, I'm going to leave him off the roster because he simply hasn't practiced. All of that could change, right? We could go into minicamp and this dude could ball out with the pads on. Then, of course, I'll have him on my prediction. But as of right now, I'm leaving him off of it for Malik Heath because Malik Heath practiced extremely well in OTAs and minicamp, even got snaps with the ones in the slot, more of that big slot type of wide receiver. So as of right now, I'm keeping Malik Heath as an undrafted free agent on offense for the 53-man roster, and I'm still keeping Bo Melton on there just for special team sakes, and I think the Packers really like him as well. Moving on to tackle, I separated this into tackle, guard, and center. So first for tackle, there is one switch up. I still have David Bakhtiari, Josh Nijman, and Caleb Jones. I feel like those 3 are definitely going to make it. Now, where I switched this up is I put Luke Tenuta on the roster over Rasheed Walker. And the reason I did this is during OTAs and minicamp, Tenuta got snaps over Rasheed Walker at starting tackle. So it seems the Packers favor Luke Tenuta over Rasheed Walker. I thought Rasheed Walker might take a nice sophomore jump, so we'll see what happens when the pad comes on, when you can really, gauge these offensive linemen when it's full contact and all of that sort. So we'll see. But again, just based off of minicamp and OTA, Luke Tenuta got more snaps, over Rasheed Walker, so that's why I have him there. Then moving to guard and center, they remain exactly the same. At guard, Elton Jenkins, John Runyon Jr., Royce Newman, and Sean Ryan. Not much to speak on there. I think those 4 are pretty obvious to make the team. And then as for center, I have Zach Tom and Josh Myers. I classify Tom as a center because he very well could start at center if they decide to put Josh Nijman at right tackle. But obviously, Zach Tom can play anywhere. He could play at center, he could play at guards, he could play at both tackles. I mean, that dude can literally play everywhere. I just have him listed as a center to list him with Josh Myers instead of having someone like Jake Hansen there, which I know the Packers do like, but I just like these 10 offensive linemen more than I like Jake Hansen. So those are my 10 offensive linemen for this prediction. Now moving on to the defense, a lot of this remains the same. I think I only made one switch, so we're going to go through this pretty quickly. For the defensive line, this remains the same. I think these 5 defensive linemen are roster locks, and there could be one slight differentiation. So Kenny Clark, Devontae Wyatt, TJ Slayton, and then rookies Colby Wooden and Carl Brooks. I think those guys are all making the roster, and I think that would be a really solid group of defensive linemen. Now, where this could change a little bit is the Packers could include John Ford in this. And the reason I say that is they really don't have a backup for nose tackle. It's TJ Slayton and TJ Slayton. Yes, some of these guys could probably, in a pinch, play nose tackle, but if the Packers want a depth guy or a rotational guy at nose tackle, they're probably going to want to keep John Ford on the roster. So the Packers could definitely go for 6 defensive linemen here instead of 7 wide receivers, and keep 6 wide receivers and remove one of Heath or Bo Melton and keep John Ford if they want another guy in the trenches. I could definitely see the Packers doing that. But for mine, I'm keeping it with these 5. I think that's a nice group of 5 defensive linemen, so that's the way I'm going to keep it. As for edge, it is also remaining the same. Preston Smith, Kingsley Enagbare, Lucas Van Ness, Justin Hollins, and undrafted free agent Brenton Cox Jr. Rashawn Gary's not on this because I believe he'll start on the IR or PUP, so he wouldn't count towards the 53-man roster. And I still have Brenton Cox making the roster. I think he's been practicing pretty well, and I think with the lack of depth at edge, I think he can definitely make this roster. He has the talent 100%. I'm just super excited to see him when the pads come on. This dude was considered a 2nd, 3rd round, 4th round edge player and went undrafted due to character concerns. So if he puts it all together, I mean, look out. This guy could be a real menace in that edge room, and I think it'd be an awesome, addition to this room. And then I still have Justin Hollins. I don't see there's any way the Packers cut him. He's had a lot of starting reps opposite Preston Smith, all of OTAs and minicamp, more so than Van Ness and Enagbare. So I feel he definitely makes the roster. Moving on to inside linebacker, this one also remains the same. We have Devondre Campbell, Quay Walker, Isaiah McDuffie, and Eric Wilson. The first 2 are obvious. Isaiah McDuffie has been getting, he was the next man up in the inside linebacker room once Devondre or Quay stepped off. It was Isaiah McDuffie, so he is linebacker number 3, or the 2nd string linebacker. So he's definitely going to make the team, in my opinion. Then I have Eric Wilson, because he can play some linebacker, but more importantly, he was our best special teams player last year in regards to PFF grade, and I think the 2nd best in the entire NFL for special teams player for PFF grade. So like I said earlier with Tyler Davis, the Packers are good at retaining their special teams players, and they want to do so. So that's why I have Eric Wilson over someone like Tariq Carpenter, who I think is making the switch to linebacker. Again, they could keep Eric Wilson and Tariq Carpenter and maybe remove one of those wide receivers, like I said earlier. They could definitely do that to prioritize special teams a little bit more. Now moving on to the cornerback position. This is our only change from our last prediction, and it goes Jair Alexander, Rasul Douglas, Keyshawn Nixon, Corey Ballantyne, that's the change there, and Carrington Valentine. The change being removing Shamar Jean-Charles off the 53-man roster. He hasn't really done much since being drafted. I was in the 5th round from Appalachian State there, and I feel like he just doesn't fit too well in this defense. When the Packers were in OTAs and Jair and Rasul weren't there, Corey Ballantyne got snaps with the ones at outside cornerback over Shamar Jean-Charles. Now, Jean-Charles did play at cornerback with the ones at some point, but Corey Ballantyne was first. So I think the Packers want him on defense over Shamar Jean-Charles, and not to mention he's a very solid special teamer. So I think he adds 2 things there. And then, of course, I still have Carrington Valentine, their 7th round corner out of Kentucky. I feel like they just want to keep that guy. He offers, depth at corner and then also special teams. Moving on to safety, we still have Rudy Ford, Darnell Savage. Both of these guys have started with the ones every single OTA practice and minicamp practice. Then we have Tarvarius Moore and Jonathan Owens. Both of those guys got snaps with the ones. Tarvarius Moore wasn't really there during minicamp, but he got snaps with the ones during OTAs. And Jonathan Owens got snaps with the ones during minicamp. So both those guys, I feel like the Packers really like. They're solid depth, veteran type of safeties, and I think they make the roster. And I still have Anthony Johnson Jr., the 7th round pick from Iowa State here, making the roster as well. I also like him. I think he could end up seeing snaps like midway through the season once he really learns the system, or if other players aren't performing well, or if an injury happens. I think that guy has a lot of talent, and I do really like him. Now, the Packers could definitely keep someone like Ennis Gaines as well. They've been moving him around. He has a lot of versatility. He can play slot, and he's also a special teamer. So as I said earlier, if the Packers wanted to keep one more defensive back instead of that 7th wide receiver, they could go with someone like Ennis Gaines here. Now moving on to special teams, this also remains the same. There's not much to change here, even if you wanted to. Anders Carlson is our kicker. He actually did really well through minicamp. I think he was 13 of 14 or 12 of 13 for extra points and field goals. So he did really well there. We have Pat O'Donnell at punter still, and then we still have Matt Orzek at long snapper. And then the final thing, just to clarify, like I said earlier, for the IR/PUP, we have 2 players, Rashawn Gary and Eric Stokes. I was thinking about removing Eric Stokes off of this and putting him in the cornerback room, but we still have yet to see him practice. We saw him moving around during minicamp, but since we have yet to see him practice, I'm still going to leave him on the PUP because the Packers are usually cautious with that sort of thing. I do believe believe there's a chance he could be ready to go week 1, but as of right now, there's nothing that is telling me, yes, he 100% will be ready to go week 1, and the same goes for Rashawn Gary. Yes, he looks good, but he has yet to practice yet. Now, if we get in a training camp and some of those guys start practicing, and I make my next 53-man roster prediction before the cutdown, yeah, they're probably going to be on it. But as for right now, keeping them on the IR/PUP. So that is my Green Bay Packers 53-man roster prediction post-OTAs, post-minicamp. Not much different from the pre-OTA, pre-minicamp one, but there definitely are some changes due to what happened in these practices. I want to hear thoughts down in the comments below. Are there any players that I left off my 53-man roster that you 100% think that guy's going to make the roster? Or is there a player on my prediction that you think will end up being cut? Let me know down in the comments below. But that about does it for this video. I appreciate everyone watching. If you could leave a like down below, it supports my channel a ton. I appreciate you guys. Catch y'all in the next one. And as always, go Pack Go.